What if the monsters weren't the ones in leather and chrome? What if the real demons wore tailored suits and flashed smiles as cold as a banker's heart? What if your last desperate hope was a wall of roaring steel and outlaw patches? For Elena, this wasn't a question. It was the only answer left. The stale air of the gas station convenience store clung to her like a shroud, thick with the smell of cheap coffee and desperation. Her own. Outside, under the sickly yellow glare of the overhead lights, they sat on their bikes. Hell's Angels. A dozen of them, a living, breathing embodiment of everything she'd been taught to fear. Their laughter was a low rumble, like distant thunder, their leather vests a collage of skulls and wings that screamed defiance. But Elena saw something else. She saw freedom. She saw power. A power she hadn't felt in 5 long years. Her hand trembled as she pushed a stray strand of hair from her face, her fingers brushing the tender, swollen skin just below her temple, a masterpiece of her husband's rage, carefully concealed by makeup and a practiced smile. Marcus Thorne, a pillar of the community, a philanthropist, a monster who built his empire on fear and decorated their home with her bruises. The memory, fresh and sharp as shattered glass, tore through her. Last night, his voice, a silken whip, curling around his threat. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about Leo, her 8-year-old son. He needs to learn respect, Elena. Marcus had hissed, his grip tightening on her arm, his knuckles white. He looks at me with your defiance. I'll beat out of him if I have to. I'll break him just like I broke you. In that moment, something inside Elena had finally, irrevocably snapped. The fear that had paralyzed her for years transmuted into a white-hot, protective fury. She could endure the pain, the humiliation, the isolation. But she would not let him touch her son. Not again. She had seen the fading handprint on Leo's small back a week ago, a mark Marcus had dismissed as a playground tumble. She had believed him, because believing was easier than facing the truth. No more. Now, she clutched the worn teddy bear in her son's backpack, the one he couldn't sleep without. Leo was waiting in their locked car, pretending to be asleep, a skill he'd learned far too young. He knew the rules. Don't make noise. Don't draw Daddy's attention. Elena's gaze drifted back to the bikers. They were laughing about something. One of them, a mountain of a man with a beard like tangled barbed wire, slapping the back of the man who was clearly their leader. He was leaner than the others, but coiled with an energy that was far more intimidating. Tattoos snaked up his neck, disappearing into a shaved head. His eyes, even from this distance, seemed to burn with a cold, blue fire. He was everything Marcus pretended to be. Powerful, commanding, dangerous. But his danger felt honest, worn on his skin like his patched leather vest. Marcus's danger hid behind a veneer of civility, making it 1,000 times more poisonous. A plan, insane and desperate, bloomed in the wasteland of her mind. It was a single, flickering match in a hurricane, but it was all she had. Taking a deep, ragged breath that felt like swallowing stones, she pushed open the glass door. The little bell above it chimed, a ridiculously cheerful sound for the end of her world. Every head turned. The laughter died. A dozen pairs of eyes, hard and assessing, locked onto her. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of gasoline, leather, and unspoken violence. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and hope. She ignored the others, her focus narrowing to the leader. She walked across the cracked asphalt, each step a monumental effort of will. She felt their stares like physical blows, dissecting her, judging her. A man with a grizzled face and a patch that read Grizz grunted, nudging his leader. Breaker! Check it out, Breaker didn't move, his gaze unwavering. He watched her approach, his expression unreadable, a mask of stone and steel. He saw the expensive but slightly rumpled clothes, the carefully applied makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in her eyes, the tremor in her hands. He saw a woman from another world, a world of manicured lawns and country clubs, a world that had no place here. Elena stopped a few feet from him, her throat closing up. The words were trapped, suffocated by fear. He was even more intimidating up close. A faded scar cut through his left eyebrow, a testament to a life lived on the edge. She could feel the raw power radiating from him, from all of them. They were a pack, and she was a wounded doe, stumbling into the wolves' den, praying they wouldn't devour her. She forced herself to meet his gaze, letting him see the raw, undiluted terror and the desperate plea behind it. She thought of Leo, alone in the car, and the dam of her composure broke. A single tear escaped, tracing a clean path through her foundation. Her voice, when it finally came, was a shattered whisper, barely audible over the hum of the gas pumps. "Please," she began, her entire future balanced on the edge of this one insane request. "Can you help me? Can you hide my son from his violent stepdad?" The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant drone of the highway. It stretched for an eternity, thick with judgment and disbelief. The bikers exchanged glances, a silent language of raised eyebrows and slight head shakes passing between them. This was not their problem. They were outlaws, not social workers. Their world was one of brotherhood, bikes, and bloodshed when necessary. They protected their own. This woman, with her designer jeans and her trembling lip, was not their own. Grizz shifted his massive frame, his expression a mixture of pity and caution. "Ma'am," he started, his voice a low rumble. "I think you got the wrong people," but Breaker didn't look away. His piercing blue eyes bored into Elena, stripping away the facade, looking for the truth. He'd seen that look before, a lifetime ago, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and grief. He'd seen it in his little sister's eyes after her husband had put her there. The same desperate hope drowning in a sea of terror. A ghost of a memory, sharp and painful, twisted in his gut. He'd been too late then, a week too late. He'd sworn on her grave that he would never be too late again. He saw the faint yellowing of a bruise high on Elena's cheekbone, an almost perfect circle she'd tried to cover. Amateurs always miss the small details. He glanced past her, towards the dark sedan, parked away from the lights. He could just make out the small silhouette of a child in the back seat, unnaturally still. His gaze returned to Elena. "His stepdad," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. It wasn't a question. He put his hands on the boy. Elena flinched as if struck, and that was all the answer he needed. A fresh wave of tears streamed down her face, and she nodded, unable to speak. He threatened. He said he would break him. She choked out, the words ripped from her soul. "The police. They don't listen. Marcus is too important, too respected. He owns everyone." Breaker's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek. He knew that story too. The powerful man, the untouchable monster. He'd put men like Marcus Thorne in the ground for less. He swung his leg off his Harley, the heavy stomp of his boot on the asphalt a final decisive sound. He stood to his full height, a monolith of black leather and righteous fury. The other bikers watched him, their posture changing, their skepticism melting away, replaced by a grim, unwavering loyalty. They knew that look. They knew what it meant. Breaker had made a decision. "Grizz," he commanded, his voice sharp as a blade. "Get the kid. Be gentle." He turned his full attention back to Elena. "What's your name?" "Elena," she whispered. "And your son?" "Leo." "All right, Elena," Breaker said, his tones softening almost imperceptibly. "You and Leo are with us now. No one's going to touch him again. I give you my word." For the first time in years, a flicker of genuine hope ignited in Elena's chest. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once. She had walked into the lion's den and offered up her heart, and the lion had just promised to protect her. The Hells Angels clubhouse wasn't a building. It was a fortress, a low-slung, windowless bunker of concrete and steel on the industrial outskirts of the city, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. To an outsider, it was the definition of menacing. But as Breaker led Elena and a wide-eyed Leo inside, it felt like the safest place on earth. The interior was a chaotic sanctuary of worn leather couches, a massive bar carved from a single slab of oak, and the lingering scent of stale beer, motor oil, and brotherhood. Bike parts hung on the walls like trophies alongside framed photos of fallen brothers. It was a world away from Elena's sterile, minimalist mansion, a home that had become a gilded cage. Leo clung to her hand, his small body trembling, but his eyes were filled with a kind of awed curiosity rather than fear. Grizz, the giant biker who had gently coaxed him from the car with a quiet promise of seeing a real chopper, knelt down to his level. "Hey, little man," he rumbled, his voice surprisingly soft. "You hungry? We got pizza. Might even have some ice cream if you play your cards right." Leo looked at his mom, who gave him a small, reassuring nod. He nodded back at Grizz, a tiny, hesitant motion. Breaker led Elena to a back room, an office that was more of an armory. A heavy desk was littered with maps and ledgers. He gestured for her to sit. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice leaving no room for omission. "Don't leave anything out. Every threat, every contact, every dirty secret you know about Marcus Thorne." And so she did. The story poured out of her, a toxic flood of years of suppressed pain and fear. She spoke of Marcus's public charm and his private sadism, his political connections, his network of favors owed by powerful people, including several high-ranking cops. She told him how he'd isolated her from her friends and family, how he controlled every cent she spent, how he'd tracked her phone and car. She was his property. When she finally finished, exhausted and empty, the room was silent. Breaker hadn't moved, his expression grim. "He's not just an abuser," he said finally. "He's a strategist. Meticulous. He built you a prison you couldn't see." He stood up and paced the small room. "He'll be looking for you. He'll use every resource he has, but he'll be looking for a scared woman and a child. He won't be looking for us." A plan was already forming behind his cold eyes. "We'll keep you and Leo here. This place is off every grid. He won't find you. My guys will start digging into Thorne's business. Men like him always have skeletons. We just need to find the right closet." Meanwhile, across town, in a house that was a monument to cold, modern architecture, Marcus Thorne discovered the empty rooms. The first emotion wasn't worry or anger. It was insult, the sheer audacity of it. His property had stolen itself. His rage was a quiet, chilling thing. He walked through the silent house, his polished shoes making no sound on the marble floors. He noted what she'd taken, a small bag, her son, and the emergency credit card he'd allowed her for appearances. He pulled out his phone and made a call, his voice smooth and calm. "Harrison," he said to the private investigator on his payroll. "My wife has had a small episode. She's taken our son. Find her. Be discreet." He hung up and made another call, this one to a police deputy who owed him more than one favor. He painted a picture of a mentally unstable wife, a danger to their child. He was the concerned husband, the victim. He played his part perfectly. He knew Elena had no one. He made sure of that. He imagined her, terrified and alone, running to some cheap motel. It would take Harrison a day, maybe two, to find her. And when he did, he would remind her of the meaning of ownership. He smiled, a thin, cruel slash in his handsome face. He poured himself a glass of expensive scotch, savoring the burn. He had underestimated nothing. The thought of a dozen leather-clad bikers being her salvation never once crossed his meticulously ordered mind. It was a fatal error in judgment. Days at the clubhouse bled into a strange new routine. For Leo, it was a paradise of noise and machinery. The bikers, who at first seemed like terrifying giants, revealed themselves to be surprisingly gentle guardians. A hulking biker named Tiny, whose arms were thicker than Leo's waist, spent hours showing him how to polish chrome until it gleamed. Grizz taught him the difference between a panhead and a shovelhead engine. For the first time in a year, Elena heard her son laugh, a full-throated, joyous sound that echoed off the concrete walls and brought tears to her eyes. She found her own purpose, helping in the clubhouse kitchen, finding solace in the simple, necessary work. One evening, she found Breaker alone in the garage, staring at a faded photograph pinned to his toolbox. It was a young woman with his same piercing blue eyes and a brilliant smile. "My sister, Sarah," he said without turning around, as if he'd sensed her presence. She thought she'd met a prince, too. A charming lawyer who bought her flowers and promised her the world. His voice was heavy with a grief that time had not dulled. By the time we found out what he was, it was too late. He broke her spirit long before he broke her bones. I wasn't there for her. He finally turned to face Elena, his gaze raw with a pain he rarely showed. This thing with you and Leo, it's not just a job. It's a second chance. We're gonna burn his whole world to the ground, Elena. I promise you that. The information started trickling in. The bikers' network ran deeper and into darker corners than any police force. They found whispers of Marcus Thorne's other life, illegal real estate deals, money laundering through shell corporations, blackmail. He wasn't just a monster at home. He was a full-blown criminal, protected by a shield of wealth and influence. But as they dug deeper, so did Marcus. His investigator, Harrison, was good. He'd found a grainy security camera image from a gas station. It showed Elena talking to a group of bikers. Marcus stared at the image, a flicker of disbelief followed by a surge of pure fury. Thugs. Gutter trash. She had run from him to them? The insult was unbearable. He escalated his search, putting a price on her head in the city's underbelly. He wanted his wife and son back, and he wanted the bikers responsible to suffer. The trap was baited with a piece of digital cheese. Grizz, a surprisingly adept tech whiz, used a burner phone to accidentally log into one of Elena's old social media accounts from an IP address they spoofed to a derelict warehouse district by the docks. It was a ghost signal, a whisper in the digital wind, designed to appeal to Marcus's arrogance. He would see it as a mistake, a stupid slip-up by a desperate woman. He would come himself, wanting the satisfaction of dragging her back personally. He wouldn't expect a reception. The night of the meeting, a storm broke over the city, lashing the streets with cold, hard rain. The warehouse district was a maze of rust and shadows, a forgotten part of the city where sirens never wailed. Marcus Thorne arrived in his sleek black sedan, flanked by two other cars filled with the kind of hired muscle that money could buy, but loyalty couldn't. He stepped out, his expensive suit jacket unbuttoned, a smug look of triumph on his face. He expected to find Elena and Leo cowering in some rat-infested corner. He was ready to deliver his lesson. Instead, what he found was a symphony of thunder. It wasn't from the sky. One by one, headlights flared to life, a dozen of them, cutting blinding swaths through the rain-soaked darkness. Then came the sound, the deep, guttural, earth-shaking roar of 12 Harley-Davidson engines firing up in unison, a sound that vibrated in his bones and rattled his teeth. The Hell's Angels were arrayed before him, a line of black leather and gleaming chrome, their bikes idling like caged beasts. Breaker sat on his motorcycle at the center of the formation, rain plastering his hair to his scalp, his face a mask of cold, controlled rage. Marcus's smugness evaporated, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. His hired guns got out of their cars, looking suddenly less confident, their hands hovering near their jackets. Thorne, Breaker's voice cut through the roar of the engines. You came for your property? We've been keeping it safe for you. You've made a grave mistake, you filth. Marcus spat, his voice tight. You have no idea who I am. Oh, we know exactly who you are. Grizz rumbled from beside Breaker. Marcus Thorne likes hurting women and kids. Dislikes paying his fair share on illegal shipments through these docks. Marcus's face went pale. The fight, when it came, was not a fight. It was an execution of a different sort. It was swift, brutal, and decisive. The bikers moved as one, a disciplined unit of force and fury against a group of paid thugs who scattered at the first real sign of resistance. Breaker dismounted, walking slowly, deliberately toward Marcus, who was fumbling to pull a small pistol from his jacket. In a blur of motion, Breaker closed the distance, his hand clamping down on Marcus's wrist. The crack of bone was sickeningly loud. The gun clattered to the wet pavement. Marcus screamed, a high, pathetic sound. You think power comes from a bank account? Breaker snarled, twisting the broken arm. You think fear is a tool you own? He slammed Marcus against the side of his own car, the impact denting the metal. This is fear, knowing you're completely, utterly helpless. Knowing that the people you hurt now have protectors who will never, ever stop, he didn't beat him senseless. He dismantled him. He leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper, detailing every crime, every dirty secret they had uncovered, every piece of evidence they now possessed. He stripped away Marcus's power, his arrogance, his very identity, until all that was left was a whimpering, broken man, sobbing in the rain. They left him there, disarmed and humiliated. As the roar of their bikes faded into the stormy night, another sound replaced it, the approaching wail of sirens. But these weren't the local cops on Marcus's payroll. The evidence package, complete with financial records, witness testimonies they'd tracked down, and a confession from one of Marcus's own men, had been delivered to the one federal agent in the city known for being incorruptible. Marcus Thorne's empire was about to crumble. Weeks later, the sun shone brightly on the clubhouse yard. The news of Marcus Thorne's arrest and indictment on charges of fraud, racketeering, and assault was all over the papers. His world had not just been burned to the ground. Its ashes had been scattered to the wind. Elena stood by a workbench, expertly cleaning a carburetor, a smudge of grease on her cheek. She wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, not a designer label in sight. A genuine smile touched her lips as she watched Leo, who was sitting proudly on Tiny's massive motorcycle, pretending to steer. Her fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, steely strength she never knew she possessed. Breaker stood in the doorway of the garage, watching them. The ghosts of his past were quieter now. He hadn't saved his sister, but he had saved Elena and Leo. He had upheld his vow. It wasn't redemption, not fully, but it was a start. He had reminded the world that even in the darkest corners, there are protectors. Sometimes, they don't wear shining armor or carry shields. Sometimes, they wear leather, ride steel horses, and answer the desperate pleas of those the world has forgotten. They're the last line of defense. The monsters who hunt monsters. So, the next time you see them on the highway, a roaring pack of outlaws, ask yourself, who are the real demons? Share this story if you believe in heroes who don't fit the mold, and comment with stories of real bikers who have done good. And if you or someone you know is in a cage, know that there is always hope. Sometimes it just arrives with the sound of thunder.